What is up, everyone? So today we're diving into the one way you can dominate your sport. This is a really interesting topic, and I think it's a topic that gets overlooked so much, and it's a thing that more athletes need to have. And this thing is not the gym. And if you look at, let's look at the context at rugby. If you look at some of the most elite players in the sport, you will see many of these athletes all have extensive backgrounds in doing this exact one thing. And if you incorporate this into your training or a part of your regime, you will see a really good benefit in your actual playing when you play your formal sport on the field. So for today's video, before I get to what that one thing is, I want to highlight the fact that this is going to be a video presented in the form of a rugby context, but it still applies whether you play football, basketball, doesn't really matter, it still applies. When we talk about some of these elites, who am I referring to when it comes to rugby? Well, we're going to look at some of the guys who have the most flash. These, namely, are Damian Willemse, who play for the Springboks. You have Richie Mo'unga, who's also an amazing fluff that played for the All Blacks and still playing for the All Blacks. You have, when we look at rugby league, Sean Johnson, and I think Benji Marshall is another honorable mention for these type of things. These are just a few that I have in mind, but there are hundreds and hundreds of these players. These players typically possess amazing decision-making skills, really good ability to beat defenders with their footwork, and overall just amazing skill. So what is this one thing that I'm referring to? This one thing that all these players have in common is hours and hours of touch rugby. Now, am I saying touch rugby is the one thing that will make all athletes dominate their sport? No. What I am referring to is informal play, with a lot of emphasis on the word informal. So before you dismiss it and think this video is just a bunch of clickbait, maybe just listen to what Richie Mo'unga or Sean Johnson had to say about their background in touch rugby.
So you are? How important was touch to you growing up?
If I think about all aspects that have contributed to, I guess, even me just sitting here talking to you about my journey, you know what I mean? Like, touch would be
Number one.
at the head of the spear, bro. It's like, without even knowing at the time, like just thinking and how I view things and how I see like defenses and space and numbers. Like, people go get your spot to count numbers, you know what I mean? I don't even count, like I just see and you know.
No, you're very good at touch.
I didn't start playing touch till I was year 10, till I was 15, 16. And that was only due to going to St Andrews College, who were pretty good at touch in the mixed grades. So I'd say touch had a huge influence on sort of adding bits to my game, adding tools to my toolbox in terms of my catch and pass, my vision, quick feed and acceleration and all that stuff. And
like I previously mentioned, this video will be in a rugby context, but that does not mean that this doesn't apply for football, for example, or basketball. It just refers to informal play, meaning not your actual training or your formal trainings with your team, with a coach. This is commonly referred to as pickup games, or maybe for football it will be fives football. And in rugby, it's typically touch rugby, but it's informal versions of your sport that you are playing. So is this really such a big thing? Informal play, can it really make you such a better player? Well, the answer is yes. Yes, it can. And arguably, that is the reason why a lot of greats are so good at their sports. Arguably, some of the best players in their sport have an extensive history of informal play when they were younger. A book called How We Learn to Move, Rob Gray describes shortly how Brazil, a country that provides some of the most elite soccer players, have virtually no real formal training academies compared to like when we look at the Netherlands or France or Belgium or Italy. Those countries all have official training academies for young players to attend from the age of 9, where they have structured everything. Yet Brazil keeps on delivering top level players regardless of not having proper training facilities, highly structured training or highly structured pathways for players to work through and then be in systems. But what does Brazil have? Well, Rob Gray kind of describes this thing called pelada. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And what pelada is, it's just a game of soccer, a game of pickup soccer with almost no ref, no age group, no real classification of gender or sex, and this is the core of the soccer development in Brazil. Rob Gray also mentions famous players like Pelé growing up and playing games like this throughout his entire development. So compared to these youth soccer academies that are all spread across Europe, Brazil doesn't have any of that. They just have this form of pelada that can even sometimes be played without any goalposts, without any real even soccer fields. Sometimes they might even play this on sandy beaches or maybe really dusty sporting grounds. So there's really, at its core, it's really not any official training. It's informal at best. There's a really cool quote that highlights the importance of informal play in these pickup games and how this develops top class athletes. And that's a quote by Bobby Charlton when he said that the World Cup for England in 1966 was not won on the training pitches of England, but it was won on the streets, referring to these street games, these street pickup games of play. Now let's go back to the rugby context. Look at South African rugby. I'm pretty biased, but I do believe that South Africa has some of the most agile rugby players to exist. It's very clear that with our Springbok team, but when you look at our Sevens team as well, and just even at grassroots level, we have some of the most agile players with the best sidesteps probably in the world. What do we have as well? Well, touch rugby is huge in South Africa, especially one-touch rugby compared to New Zealand and Australia, where they play more 6 downs. We have 6 touches. We play one-touch rugby, and this is extremely popular in South Africa. Another example of a professional team that is amazing at what they do and have almost none of the facilities that any other country has in rugby is Fiji. Fiji is so dominant in sevens rugby, known for their more unstructured way of playing. They attribute most of their success to playing touch rugby, to lots of play. Players have even mentioned in interviews that if you drive around in Fiji, it's like 200 meters, and then you see another group of people playing touch rugby. Everywhere in that country is people playing with a rugby ball and playing some sort of touch rugby game. Much like Brazil, despite having none of the same resources that all the other countries have, they create amazing players. They produce amazing elite rugby players, all because of the power of play that is so enriched in their culture. Now the question is, why does informal play work so well at developing world-class athletes? First of all, it allows athletes to express themselves freely. And this is where the part where I said the informal part of informal play is so important. In formal play or informal training, making mistakes is frowned upon. Coaches have certain expectations or images of how things should look, and making mistakes is unproductive in that way. So that makes expressing yourself so much harder. So players are way less likely to express themselves and actually get better at more higher class skills because they have a higher likelihood of making a mistake when trying this. And even with most coaches, if I look at a South African context, mistakes are even punished. And ultimately, this stifles the creativity that players need to become amazing. So because formal environments create this fear of failure, it's really hard for athletes to practice expressing themselves and practice difficult skills. But informal playing, and a large amount of them, makes it possible for athletes to practice these things. Therefore, when they get to formal trainings, they're already well versed in these more difficult skills, so they can perform it without having fear of failure. They have hours and hours and hours of experimenting, failing, experimenting, failing, experimenting, succeeding, and knowing what works, adapting and getting better at every single thing. The second thing is, a lot of these informal games is another version of the actual game that you play. So it mimics real game situations. So in turn, what this creates is, it creates players with an amazing game sense. Players have better decision making, players can read defenders better, and all their reactions to what happens in front of them becomes more natural. Unfortunately, with the majority of coaches coaching the way they do in South Africa, this really does not get trained. The reason therefore is because touch rugby is fun, and fun and informal play is seen as being unproductive. As soon as something is fun and unserious, it's not productive. It's sad that that is the way that coaches see it, because I think coaches could develop their players so much more by just including small amounts, maybe 20 to 30 minutes of informal play per week in their training. But unfortunately, formal trainings are more focused on drills, structures, and captain's runs. So these athletes all were great before they came to those formal trainings, but they were great because of the informal play, the play that they accumulated over the years of development. From a personal anecdote, I can admit that when I was younger, I was not good at my sport. I was always stressed at training, I never understood drills, and I never was good at accepting the fact that I'm gonna make mistakes. I was so scared of making mistakes at training growing up. I think throughout the first 6-7 years of playing rugby, I only played lower than the 3rd or 4th team, never much higher, until I started playing touch rugby. I started playing touch rugby in the park with friends. I started playing touch rugby with my older brother's friends. I started playing touch rugby with my dad, with grown-ups. And then all of a sudden, at training, formal trainings, coaches were looking at, looks like Eugene has some skills. There's a bit of footwork over there, and it started to develop a lot. And that's only because I had hours and hours and hours built up and then created and developed me a bit more. And that's what real development is for athletes. And another unfortunate part, this is unrelated to the video, so I'll make it short, is that training is so result-based that coaches are so far away from getting players to actually develop. They want the players to be developed before the time. So they're not focused on developing the player, they want the player to be developed so they can achieve their wins and look good because their team wins. But unfortunately, this informal play, having a bit of fun as well, is the way that elite athletes get created in these sporting environments. So the secret is simple for you watching this video. Go play an informal version of your sport. Get some friends, go to a park, go to a field, play in the road, play your sport informally more often. Try things, express yourself, have fun. It will help you a lot more than you think. That's all I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you want to watch more of these.